The Indiana Fever were able to get the coach that they wanted, Stephanie White. The questions I have today, was that a personal favor hiring Stephanie White? Or is Stephanie White the coach to take to the WNBA championship as the Indiana Fever expect? And thirdly, was hiring Stephanie White a major violation of WNBA rules? We'll discuss that and more today on the Money Mike Syndicated Radio podcast. Welcome and thank you for joining you. We always tell you it's my opinion, but if it turns to truth, I've given you the facts before they happen. The Indiana Fever hired the Sun coach, Stephanie White, to replace Christy Sides. Obviously, Christy Sides was unable to maintain the level of intensity coaching that the Indiana Fever were looking for. The Indiana Fever made a decision, and this seems like a decision that was made a long time ago, to hire Stephanie White. Now, the question I have, by the Indiana Fever hiring Stephanie White, was that a personal favor to hire Stephanie White? In the incident of events that occurred prior to Stephanie White being hired by the Indiana Fever. And as I take a deeper dive into this, here's what I really want to bring to the table. Stephanie White also coached the Indiana Fever and was a player in the WNBA. There's no doubt about it. Stephanie White also was Gatorade Player of the Year in Indiana, played well, and is a fan favorite, as everyone knows. Now, but we go back, and Stephanie White was able to tell us on national TV that I'm not making any decisions. The only decision I'm concerned about at this time is my family. So that's where we took it from the heartfelt. We took it in prayer. We took it to God for the safety, security, and stability of Stephanie White. Now, today we move forward and we fast forward. Stephanie White is now the head coach of the Indiana Fever. As Stephanie White comes into the Indiana Fever, we must understand one thing. The Indiana Fever, when you replace Christy Sides, there's going to be a lot of other things that are going to replace with that. What do you mean? I expect CaitlinClark numbers to go down somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 to 14 points and about 10 assists. I expect differences of challenges where a Stephanie White comes in and then Alyssa Smith situation. That's a simple fix for Stephanie White. Why? Because you're going to come off the bench and you'll probably play 12 to 14 minutes a game. So now it's your decision if that's what you want to do. My decision, you may have a better place somewhere else. Now, as we move forward and we look at it, the personal favor, because now we have a coach that was leaving for personal family reasons, which I said, and I took it full credit and I took it face value of the credibility of the individual that was speaking. However, that individual turned right around and took a job at the Indiana Fever. That I do question, because if you're going to take the job as the Indiana Fever, then very well, that would have been the job that you should have taken. Now, when you get and you go a step further, we obviously know, as I am Indiana Fever, they have a dream team now. But did they do that accordingly? Or did they do it with reckless abandon? And here's my question. I'm a fan of WNBA. I'm a big proponent of WNBA women's basketball. In fact, I have the women's national program now. It's going to be in Las Vegas, 100,000 first prize. We got that approved for the women. Now, but here's where I'm going. When you get to doing things and you hire you replace Christy Sides, okay, and you do this, right? When you went right in there, okay, and you had an interview and you said, wait a minute, I'm not going to do any coaching. I don't want to talk about any coaching, but you move forward. Now, here's the big one, because the WNBA, and let me tell you where I'm going, and this is a major one for me. And I really want to just take time on this and really put it in perspective. For the WNBA to allow the Indiana Fever to hire Stephanie White. Here's my question. That's tampering, folks. That is tampering. That is tampering. And now I have to go back to the WNBA. And here's my question. Are there rules in the WNBA? Now, when you get to the integrity of the game, now the integrity of the game, and what do I mean? Well, we watched the NBA final and it came down to whether it was a foul or not, but the player took 4 to 6 steps before the shot even went up. Okay, all those things are stacking integrity. This hire would be tampering. Okay, and you have to know that because now what you're saying is if we don't have tampering, right, then anybody can go to any player or any coach. Okay, and you have to be able to be sure about what you're doing and how you're going to do it because if you do it from another way, then that one there is going to cause problems, right? Because the NBA has a clear rule on tampering, okay? And it costs you when you have somebody that is in there and is tampering with players, right? You gotta look at that and say, is this a tampering hire? Because you can't go to another coach. All right, let's talk about the rules of tampering, right? The NBA, which they have the WNBA, follows those rules. Okay, NBA tampering rule prohibits any team member from attempting to lure a player or a coach from another team. You can't go out there and decide, okay, that okay, I want this coach, all right, and I'm gonna go ahead and get this coach because I feel really if I look at the league in a total, and I'm trying to bring some stuff up here, folks, but I look at the league in a total, and I have to ask myself, is this good for the league? This is not good for the league here. I mean, because you can't just go out and just say I want this player or I want this coach, right? Because the NBA gets into it, and you get into tampering, you can lose draft picks. Okay, you can lose draft picks, right? You can lose compensation. All right. And here's where I'm at with the Connecticut Sun. All right. And here's really where I'm at because the WNBA has got to have rules, right? So you can't just go in there and say because you coach at another team, which I'm all for Stephanie White being on the Indiana Fever, but you cannot because here's the deal. Why don't somebody go to Becky Hammond and say, Becky, I got $5 million for you to be the coach of my team, right? I got a new WNBA team starting in Toronto. I want Becky Hammond as my coach. Becky Hammond, I'm going to give you $5 million or whatever your salary is now. I'm put a 5X multiple on it. That's tampering, folks. The league does not operate like that. When you have games and you have coaches and talking to other players, you cannot go to another team and lure a player away from that team. Stephanie White, this is where I'm going. Was this a personal favor? Because the personal favor gets a little murky in the water, right? Because this is my main point here. You have Stephanie White was under contract for the Connecticut Sun. That's a contract. You can't just walk out of your contract. Okay, and this is where it brings me back to, is this a personal favor? Is this something the WNBA approved? Is something Kathy Engelbert approved? Because you can't just go take another player from another team or start talking to players and say, I want you to come here. There has to be rules in this. In the NFL, that's a major violation. Get you suspended for a year, an owner. Okay, they've suspended owners for a year. It'll cost you two first, second, third round draft pick, and it's going to cost you millions of dollars in fine, right? You cannot go out there and take somebody else's coach. So my question is, was this a personal favor? Because if it was a personal favor, then what you've done is you've done a major rules violation in doing a personal favor for a coach. The NBA's tampering rule prohibits any team member from attempting to lure a player. Okay, this one here, the rule came out as a player, but that also means a coach. Okay, and you really have to understand this because tampering is not a light offense. It should not be a light offense, okay, in the WNBA. It just that's something that you cannot have in the WNBA. And let me go a step further here, folks, because I really just want you to understand. Okay, Money Mike, what are you saying? Because you're saying a lot, but what are you saying? Okay, so here's the deal, right? The NBA tampering rules. What is tampering? The NBA states that any organization member, coach, player, executive, or owner cannot speak to a player on a rival team to lure them, right? So the rule works the same for a coach. You can't go to a coach that's under contract and say, "Hey, I want you to come coach my team," right? That because the other team and the way it works in the NFL, I'll give you an example, and it works same way everywhere, really is the fact that you had John Gruden was with the Raiders. All right, he's a head coach, right? Him and Al Davis didn't see eye to eye. No problem, right? He leaves. He wants to go to Tampa Bay. He's going to win a Super Bowl, which he did, right? But Tampa Bay had to compensate Oakland Raiders for John Gruden. You can't just take a coach under contract and now the team that the coach is no longer there, okay, is now without a coach. I don't know how that really works itself. So we got to ask ourselves, are there rules in the WNBA? Great hire of Stephanie White. Now, when you get to Stephanie White, you get to the hiring of Stephanie White, is it gonna be a difference? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, right? Because you gotta look at this. You replace Christy Sides, right? So at the end of the day, let's ask ourselves totally by doing this. That's why I say personal favor, or is there something else? Because it really doesn't fit the bill. I mean, it's gonna bring a lot of people's numbers down. You got to get used to Caitlin's numbers gonna come down quite a bit, right? Like I said, gonna give me about 14 points, maybe 8, 9, 10 assists a game. That's about where Caitlin's gonna average because in the new offense and the defense, you got to do so much facilitating, right? But when I look at Stephanie White, I look at her career, right? Stephanie was a player, averaged about 5 points a game, right? So you're really coaching somebody to do something you didn't have, you never did, right? So, but then I go to Stephanie White and I go, wow, okay, you're going to replace Chrissy Sides, and here am I at. This is a personal favor. I keep asking because when I ask, is it a personal favor? Let me tell you why I asked that because the numbers don't line up. The numbers don't line up here, right? So when you were coaching, okay, and you were a player, you gotta understand you went over to Vanderbilt for 5 years. 5 years. You didn't turn that program around, right? Normally, superstars in 5 years, they turn programs around, right? So the Indiana Fever at best, I'm gonna tell you, when you replace this Christie site, this is gonna be a 3-year. First year is gonna be extremely bumpy road for the Indiana Fever and the Dream Team, right? And let me tell you why it's gonna be an extremely bumpy road because when I look at sports, and every time you get the sports and everything going, and whenever there's something else that's going on, you're gonna have to deal with that, right? You're gonna have to deal with that. So they got an all-star game that they got to put in there, right? So you got the all-star game and you got to focus on that. You got the general managers got to focus on that. And normally you'll see it all the time with NFL teams when they get awarded the Super Bowl. Go back and look at their history of what they performed and how they performed the year before. Okay, they hosted the All-Star game or the year before they hosted the Super Bowl, right? They usually go in the tank. The team doesn't really perform because all the focus of the organization is building into that event that they have to host, right? But when I look at Stephanie White, that's okay as a player. You average this many points. That really doesn't matter what you average. I mean, if you're good at what you do. Now, here's the deal. You go over to Purdue. We don't produce a result at Purdue. Now, this is strange for me because you always want to know how some coaches get hired off their win and loss total. Some coaches get favors, right? You get a favor here, and this is what this one is because you got an Indiana. It just fits. It fits good. It works, but you got to look at the result. I want to give you the correct result before we get there. So it's my opinion. But if I happen to give you the truth, that means I'm giving you the facts before they happen, right? When it turns to truth. So I got a player, I got somebody who coached at the Indiana Fever, didn't get it done, right? But here's the deal. This is what's so interesting to me. You move from today where you got coach of the year goes to Cheryl Reed, right? She gets the award, which is a good award. It's called the WNBA Coach of the Year, right? So, and I look back at that, okay? Now you look at Christy Sides, and here's where I think Christy Sides might have got the short end of the stick, but it's professional basketball. It is what it is, right? You got Stephanie White's been Coach of the Year twice. Okay, she got Coach of the Year for finishing third place for the Indiana Fever, right? Got Coach of the Year. Went over to Connecticut Sun, got Coach of the Year, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting, and I get right back to it, and I just call it a personal favor, right? Because you got to look at this and you got to say to yourself, what how does this all calculate? Now, I'm not saying from the point of the person's ability to coach, right? Because I mean, I could have people stand in line telling me how great of a coach that Stephanie White is. That's not what I'm basing this. I'm looking at the history. So if the angels from heaven open up the window and the doves come falling down, there's going to be another miracle that's going to land on the Indiana Fever. And I believe that can happen, right? But it won't be because Stephanie White, because you're going Stephanie White left the Indiana Fever to go coach a better team, which she wanted to do for her aspirations of coaching, but she didn't win. And you got to look at this. You got to look at this correctly. They're going to add free agents. So the Indiana Fever are kind of a remote control car. It's like a Tesla. They're going to win games regardless of who's coaching, right? Because you're going to get them back next year. They're vets. They're better suited. You're going to get one or two more free agents. So it's not going to be because Stephanie White did anything. Stephanie White, if she comes to the Indiana Fever and not having this as a personal favor, will have to win the WNBA championship. She doesn't win the WNBA championship, then it's basically a failure, right? Because you got a coach who already has coached better players than you have on this team, who's already has coached better players than you're going to get. So will the Indiana Fever, they're going to make some moves, but will they be as good as the Connecticut Sun? That's to be determined, right? But it's not about talent that wins the WNBA championship. It's about synergy, right? And you're going to get the synergy of Stephanie White and CaitlinClark. Because I don't care who you are. Okay, you may walk on water like Stephanie White does. Everybody loves you like Stephanie White. Everybody wants you to be the coach in Indiana by Stephanie White. But I'm going to tell you, Money Mike's going to take Caitlin Clark is a hard player to coach, right? So it's going to be like any other player, except now Stephanie White, you got out of the Connecticut Sun. Now they had the Connecticut Sun on the back burner. Now we got Stephanie White on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. That's right. See, when you were with the Sun, you were in the sports section. Now, Stephanie White, you're on the front page, okay, of the Wall Street Journal. And when you're on the front page and you got the valuations, you got the debt financing, you got everything right. And this one here, sometimes you can get a personal favor that you ask for too much. I think Stephanie White can get it done. But let me tell you this, Stephanie White, this personal favor is going to cost you a lot of sleepless nights because the pressure of winning Indiana is higher than anyone else. And we're bringing Stephanie White into the Indiana Fever to do something she has never done before. Never done before. And now we're asking her to win a championship. If she wins the championship, it will be her first in her career. There's no doubt about that. The WNBA, I want to remind you of one thing, the Indiana Fever, there's no doubt they're getting good. Okay, but the women's game and the other teams, they're getting good too. And this is a copycat league. So you got CaitlinClark running that show. There ain't no doubt about it, right? But at the end of the day, when it comes to coaching CaitlinClark, there ain't no personal favor going to serve you from that because all eyes are on it. The league is taking off. I got another story. I'm going to back this one up. The WNBA officials, that one there should be handled by Mr. Tom Drakeford. International Pro-Am basketball officials. Got a lot of guys that work the league, NBA, and that can get fixed. But now, Stephanie White, I just ask you, Was this a personal favor? And if it was a personal favor, okay, for you, the Indiana Fever, to go ahead and replace Stephanie White. And the way the Indiana did it, I'm just telling you, you got to look at that. That's tampering. And if there is not a tampering rule in the WNBA, then here's what happens. Anybody can go get anybody. You can go snatch players. You can get them over here. You can get money under the table. There's a lot of things you can do. You can give them new cars. There's a lot of things you can do to get players to come play for your team, right? And when you get to tampering, man, that's a major violation. That right there is right teetering on something you don't want to open that Pandora's box. Now, this is a cleanup because players, and they've done it in the past. Here's what I've noticed. The WNBA has done this in the past, right? But that's not a rule. That you can't do it. And the NBA knows that. And the NBA is clear on that, right? So you got the NBA saying, look, here's the deal. Here's a tampering rule, which means if you see NBA, it means WNBA. Now, if Kathy Engelbert's going to come out and say, Mike, we don't have tampering in the WNBA, well, then that means it's a free for all. Whoever's got the most money, pay them under the table. Come on over and play for me. I'll get you an extra 100 grand a month, right? Because you got to have rules to be successful, and you got to have integrity to be successful. And the WNBA has both of that. This just may have been an oversight that a coach in the Indiana Fever to hire Stephanie White to leave a contract to go over and take another contract. Connecticut's son, in all fairness and equity of the WNBA, they need to be compensated for that without a doubt. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. We're powered up by Fanatics. We believe the WNBA is fantastic, and we are just enjoying this offseason. All things are possible to those who believe. We'll see you soon.